SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Have you been seriously injured? Mama Justice is here for you. Our medical team partners with top-notch doctors, surgeons, therapists, and urologists, ensuring a comprehensive recovery journey. If you've been injured, call Mama Justice today. We're here for you.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Friday, y'all.
Morning there, Rhino.
We made it.
We did. We made it through another week. I don't know about that old legislature down there, though. Wow. Oh, we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I got to talk about something that's from the world of, I wouldn't call this trivia, but let's just say it's something that's probably not found all over the mainstream news. And that is scientists are working to save the planet's glaciers. You seen this? This is interesting. Glacial ice stores 70%, I wasn't aware of this, of the Earth's fresh water. That's pretty critical to human life and sustainability of it. But it appears that ice is on the front line of some just changes in nature that might be causing problems for us, even with our goals of trying to limit warming, global warming, and all that sort of stuff. Apparently, these glaciers are shrinking. Now, was it not Al Gore that said the caps would, in fact, melt and just flood the world?
Yeah, thered be no snow on Mount Fuji.
That's right. But there's a group of university scientists that are all working together to figure out how to protect the glaciers. Now, I'm not convinced that the challenge, the threat, is 100% a function of greenhouse gases. That's usually what they like to tell you. But there actually is a group involved in glacier preservation, an international team of glacier scientists. They apparently have formed the Glacier Stewardship Program. Does that mean you can contribute to the cause of saving glaciers?
I'm sure you can.
Whether or not that actually goes for its intended goal there and purpose remains to be seen. Says Professor Jerome Newfield from the University of Cambridge, a truly international effort is needed to figure out how we can safeguard these resources. Every molecule of greenhouse gas makes more melting ice. So reducing carbon emissions is critical to help save glaciers. However, the scientists say reducing emissions alone is not enough. You don't say. It is likely that even under the most ambitious emissions reduction scenario, we will see the loss of many crucial glaciers. remarks.
It's almost like this thing's cyclical and has been happening long before there was ever a term called science or scientists.
Boy, they don't want to admit that, do they?
Especially when you start finding stuff like, oh, there's a glacier over in Europe that's been melting for eons now, and they're finding a forest with what appear to be artifacts of settlement within the forest that was buried underneath the glacier. So somehow people lived in that area before the glacier was there.
That just doesn't fit the narrative.
How does that work?
Well, more importantly, what about these domestic terrorists who are destroying electric vehicles? I thought the whole idea was to transition to electric vehicles so as to reduce carbon emissions and preserve the glaciers.
It's because the left really doesn't give a rat's rear end about the environment. They only care about control and feelings, and they use feelings to gain control.
Sad but true. Sad but true. But I'm pleased to see Attorney General Pam Bondi take action against those who have seen fit to destroy the property of others. Does this not remind of the Jenny Durkin summer? She, the mayor of Seattle, right? What was the name of that group that just set up shop in the middle of Seattle? And
Chaz.
Yeah, creating their own little country.
Whatever it was.
But while that was going on, of course, we had BLM riots across the fruited plain in the wake of the George Floyd incident. And they were helping themselves to whatever they wanted and rationalizing it, justifying it, taking other folks' property, destroying and hurting people as well. This is what it reminds me of. Just watching these unbelievable video, guys, if you hadn't seen it, of what's happening at Tesla dealerships across the country. It's just incredible. These are some really sick people. What are the odds that they're being paid by leftist oligarchs? What are the odds of that?
About 50-50 at this point.
I mean,
they are greedy, selfish, worthless individuals, but a lot of them are just crazy enough to do it for free.
Well, it's arson. And Attorney General Pam Bondi says they will face the full force of the law. 3 people face federal charges for these Tesla attacks. And NPR asks, are such acts domestic terrorism?
Of course they do.
Well,
because there's not an ounce of testosterone in the entirety of that building.
That's true. So 3 so far have been arrested of domestic terror, charged with domestic terrorism. Now, keep this in mind. NPR, I'm sure, was in full support of Biden and his DOJ and FBI and
they're slobbering all over them.
Other arms of law enforcement when they deemed that parents were domestic terrorists, right? Because they were objecting to the indoctrination of their children in educational settings where adults, left-wing radical education community adults, were thrusting this outrageous race and gender ideology on our children. Not only that, but lots of content that denounces and condemns this country. Oh, but the people who attended school board meetings and objected to things like having
dudes in dresses
just hang out with the girls in the bathrooms, in the locker rooms. Oh, no, you're a domestic terrorist for opposing that. Was it not the same with respect to Catholics who were protesting essentially and making their views heard and seen concerning opposition to abortion? Weren't they also deemed to some extent as people we have to watch out for? And of course, From day one in the Biden administration, the number one threat, according to Joe and his Democrat cohorts, white supremacy. And everybody essentially...
Yet somehow 95 to 99% of all racist acts reported by mainstream media turned out to be hoaxes.
Complete hoax.
Performed and carried out by Democrat operatives and losers that vote for liberals.
Totally true. What was the guy that... What the heck was the performer? Was it the rap artist that faked all that crap?
Oh, the actor, Jussie Smollett.
Jussie Smollett, right. I said rap artist.
He managed to convince some of the media.
Yeah.
There were many people in media going, huh? That stinks to high heaven. Something smells fishy. But it convinced some in the media. It convinced the person that ran for president on the Democrat ticket.
That's so true. Well, I'm pleased
Even though it was just a stupid story to go out in the middle of the night in Chicago when it's like -4 degrees and two dudes in MAGA hats put a noose on you. Like, that's believable. They called Chicago MAGA country? That's believable.
Yeah, what a great hoax that was. Unbelievable. Well, I'm pleased to see that the Attorney General is taking appropriate action here in arresting and seeking to prosecute those who destroy the property of others. That's just consistent with the age-old rule of law. Coming right back in the Element Wealth Studio. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Check it out. Let's do this. The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
That from the all-hit request line. That's for you, Gary in the Berg. I think you're the one that sent us that request. It's Grand Funk Railroad, Mark, Don, and Mel, the trio from Flint, Michigan. I was probably 71, 72, 70, something like that. That was one of their big old hits there. It's kind of a long tune. It's pretty cool, too. I'm Your Captain.
Released June 15th, 1970.
Oh, shoot. I said 71 at first, missed it by a year. But that's when they were at the height of their popularity. No doubt about it.
And that was actually the 2002 remaster.
Oh, cool. Well, it was nice and clear. Good sound there. Appreciate that. So, yeah, just kind of wrapping that up. Is it not refreshing to see an attorney general who actually enforces the law? Now, I'm talking about the law as written. Pretty sure that destroying property, vandalism, breaking and entering, and the like, pretty sure that's against the law across the country. So, when you break those laws, you should suffer the consequences. Is there any question about that?
Not if you're sane or conservative or Republican or normal.
I see.
But if you're liberal or Democrat or crazy, then yeah, there's all kind of problems with that.
Well, this idea that we sort of rationalize crime We justify it. We excuse it. It's sickening. You cannot have a functioning, thriving, prosperous society without adherence and enforcement of the rule of law. It's simple as that. And just think about how much wealthier and how better the quality of life for all of us would be if bad people would quit doing bad things. We all pay
or at the very
for
least,
that.
if good people would stop the bad people from doing bad things.
That is absolutely
and
true.
I don't mean a slap on the wrist. I don't mean a harsh talking to. I mean stop them.
I completely
at a point,
agree.
Put your foot down and tell these idiots and clowns and worthless wastes of oxygen enough is enough.
Totally agree. But there's been no inclination for that from the left. But I think
half the country's worried about freaking feelings over
no doubt.
reality.
But it's pretty cool when you think about the fact that this country always returns to normal. We got off the rails there for a while. We went into loony land, but we did return. We did slide back at a minimum to the middle, which was way better than what we had before because the left got so far dang out there to the left. It was a long journey to get back just to the middle. But I just say it's refreshing to see that. That's all. That we actually have an attorney general and federal law enforcement system apparatus that's doing their job and enforcing the law. I think that's great. And she's issued warnings, has she not, as well? So you keep doing this, you're going to suffer the consequences. It's Kristi Noem, also with Homeland Security, saying, you come across this border, we're going to enforce the law. You got to applaud this. This is what we voted for. This is what we wanted. This is the way it should be. This is a return to normal. As Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, we're trying to move away from crazy. It's just flat out crazy.
At this point, you either got to be stupid or crazy to be a Democrat supporter.
It
One
seems
of the two.
like it.
You either have to be so stupid that you are unwilling to educate yourself out of ignorance, or you have to be so slap crazy that it's impossible for you.
I just think this bodes well for the future of the country, and I mean in the short term. I really do. Just even from an economic, and I always like to relate things to that, because like it or not, you got to have money. Money, wealth creation, prosperity, keys to the quality of life. Just simple as that. You can't deny it. That's not to say that you're worshiping money. No, it doesn't mean that. Of course not. Not over human life itself, but human life is dramatically enhanced when you're prosperous. All the stuff that we enjoy today in our society, only because of prosperity and opportunity. What really galls me, and I know I talk about this a lot, we played, of course, Schumer yesterday, but now you're hearing the left, the Democrats in particular, really rail on the Republicans' efforts now in full gear to get a budget passed. And, of course, they know the Trump tax cuts are scheduled to expire at the end of the year, and they want them to. But this nonsense really just irks me, that we've got to take away critical services from people in order to pay for tax cuts for the rich. That is horse hockey. That's horse hockey. That, once again, presumes that all wealth created emanates from government. That we only let you keep what we think you should keep. Out of the goodness of our hearts, we're altruistic and charitable. The two are not linked. There's this nonsensical statement to say that, we got to cut spending over here to give tax cuts to the rich. No, that's not how it works. That's just illogical. Of course, not that they've ever tried to encase any of their positions with logic and root them in logic and common sense. That's out of the question. But, man, you're hearing that all over the place. We've got to make sure the billionaires keep their tax cuts, and we're going to do that on the backs of all these other people whose services were taken away. What did Sanders say the other day? We're taking food out of the mouths of children and health care away from seniors so that billionaires could have their tax cuts.
He's welcome to sell one of his 4 houses to help him out if that were actually true, but he knows it's a lie. The problem is the people that support him don't.
That is absolutely
because they buy
true.
Everything that comes out of his flapping gums as the gospel truth.
And that's sad. And I'm bringing that up right now because you've seen this. AOC, Bernie, they're traveling around the country doing their little rallies, and they got the big signage out on the podium, fighting oligarchy. What the heck is that all about? Oh, my gosh. Fighting.
Well, you see, billionaires just wasn't quite getting the job done. It wasn't polling strong enough as a language.
I think
so
you're
we
right.
have to go to oligarch because nobody's actually going to look up what it means. It just sounds scarier than billionaire. But I would ask, if anybody talks to Bernie Sanders, ask the witless wonder exactly which state-run industry has become privatized that made someone rich enough to have political influence, because that's the definition of oligarch, you dummy.
He doesn't get that. He absolutely. Well, it's the same way in which they in such a cavalier fashion toss around the word fascism. Basically, fascism is any policy they don't like. That's fascism. It's not even remotely close to being consistent with the actual meaning of fascism. It's just crazy.
They all are.
In fact, the truth is, all the stupid regulations that they send down the pike to businesses, that's fascism. And all the taxes, that is fascism. Oh, the private sector exists for the benefit of government. That's fascism. They're intermingled. That's fascism. We're coming right back with Wes Jennings. Stay with us.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Welcome to our show.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, now you have a good one.
I never meant to be so bad to you. One thing I said that I would never do. A look from you and I would fall from grace, and that would wipe the smile right from my face. Do you remember when we used to dance, and incidents arose from circumstance?
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We're live in the Element Well studio. It's our pleasure to welcome now Wes Jennings, Gillespie Distinguished Scholar, Chair and Professor of Criminal Justice and Legal Studies, and Co-Director of the National Center for Narrative Intelligence. Wes, thanks for coming on. Good to see you.
I appreciate it, Gerard. Good to see you, too.
Check your mic there, Wes. We're good?
Sorry,
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay, got you. Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
I
got
got
you.
you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Good morning,
Okay.
sir.
No problem. Good to see you. Yeah, appreciate you coming on. So tell us about this collaboration going on with the University of Mississippi and numerous other universities in just exploring the application and use of artificial intelligence, primarily in education and in research.
Yes, no, I appreciate having this opportunity to discuss this with the listeners and you. So basically, OpenAI, which is a leading, AI worldwide leader in that space, reached out to individual institutions several months ago talking about the ability to start this research consortium. And it wasn't open access. They selected specific institutions. They recognized Ole Miss as a pioneer in AI, given the great things that are going on currently at our institution related to that. And so they reached out to us and said, hey, if we gave you some resources, what could your institution do to promote research related to AI?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Did you guys get some grants for this? Is there some money being invested in this across the educational landscape to advance the research here?
Absolutely. So essentially, we received $50,000 as one kind of cash grant award to the university, and then I am developing a call for proposals for students, faculty, and staff at the University of Mississippi to propose a project using AI and AI tools, and they'll conduct that research with this kind of Kickstarter money for their big idea, and then we'll be able to showcase and present their products.
So, Wes, given the relationship and the initiative by OpenAI or in ChatGPT, are you primarily focused on GPT type AI, generative AI, or do you think you're going to expand that into other more general type AI and more human decision making related AI?
Oh, sure. I mean, as it relates to this specific consortium, obviously it's OpenAI related. So the idea that these stipends, these awards, right, will be drawing from OpenAI's platform of AI tools. But it's very broad in terms of using other types of AI, large language models for the research is certainly fair game too, right? And the idea is just really, planting the flag around AI research in Mississippi, in this state, right, in the surrounding Mid-South region as a hub for this. And then we can grow from there to get more national attention for folks around here regarding what we're doing regarding AI.
So what's the goal here, Wes? Is it to create new applications, new use cases, new tools, new platforms, new LLMs that could be shared amongst the institutions, or have you got some specific problems in mind that you'd like to use the technology perhaps to address and solve?
No, you're absolutely right. All of that is fair game. And in terms of the scope of this project, generally, we have a lot of bright minds, a lot of bright students that have these ideas and that are, say, only a little bit of money or resources away from taking that idea prime time.
Yeah.
And so the idea of just to showcase that will build the connectivity, interdisciplinary collaboration across campus. And then once we have this, we can extend those connections to other institutions around the state, obviously, and outside as well.
Wes, is there some possibility that the university or the universities may commercialize some of these technologies you guys develop?
I can certainly see that as a possibility because again, this is the ground floor, right, of the research consortium. That's just 15 universities and institutions right now. I can't speak for OpenAI, obviously, but I can only assume the idea is for that to roll out and expand as us being, initial badge carrying members of the consortium, right?
Yeah.
There will be larger convenings to share these ideas and products with others and the community.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that we're in the throes of a revolution, honestly, an AI revolution. I've seen in my business career, my technology career, certain pivotal inventions that were just transformative in nature. And I know this may sound crazy, but back in the early mid-'80s when the personal computer was invented, we kind of thought that ushered in a new renaissance. And then we saw networking and the internet and cloud computing and just through the various trends and revolutions in the industry, and now here's a new one, and it's actually not new, as you know. This has been around since the 50s. Scientists have been talking about development of AI, but I think what's different is it's all the other tools that have been invented since then that facilitate this. Without the internet, without cloud computing, without low-cost storage and super high-speed, high-performance processors, this wouldn't be possible.
You were absolutely correct. The idea is not new, but the infrastructure is, right? And the evolution of that infrastructure and the widespread availability of that infrastructure is now, prime to really blow this up, so to speak, right? And AI is touching everybody's life, the degree to which they're aware of it or not.
That's exactly right.
It's baked into a lot of the stuff that we're already using, right?
Yeah. Common everyday tasks and applications we don't even know about. I mean, it's happening kind of in the background and without sometimes our knowledge. I mean, there's nothing nefarious or illegal going on. It's just a new tool set. It's a new business tool set. And I use whenever I speak an example that I feel like maybe is easy to understand. It's Walmart's use of AI-powered bots to negotiate contracts with its vendors. And so you literally go online if you want to sell something to Walmart, and you enter your proposal through a portal. And in the old days, they had humans that would work with you, in their procurement group and negotiate and hammer out the terms. And Walmart replaced all that with AI-powered bots, and they maintain that they're getting lower pricing and better terms using the technology than they did using humans, not to mention it drove their costs down of that process.
Absolutely. I mean, the AI has a profound ability to build efficiencies in everybody's lives, right? And business, industry, government, academia, education, obviously. The idea that AI is taking people's jobs, I don't go that far, but somebody at some point in the near or soon to be near future who knows how to use AI, but still maintains their role as the human intelligence, the human subject matter expert, they might be coming for your job.
Yeah. Certainly if the task is repetitive, it's a prime candidate. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of that. How important is it, Wes, to ensure that students doing research related to education, that students are exposed and have at least rudimentary skills in use of the technology, because they're likely to be required to do so in almost any job that they hold?
Yeah, that is a huge piece of this in terms of education and workforce development, right? Because the degree to which, again, it's already baked into things that they're working on. These are the digital native generation. They grew up with technology, internet, cell phones.
Gotcha.
And AI is going to be part of that. So we want them to be the best and brightest as they enter the workforce, rather than having no knowledge or limited knowledge. Like general surface level knowledge of AI and AI tools.
Makes sense.
What they do, what they can't do, what they shouldn't do. That's what we want them to know.
Professor Wes Jennings with he's a Gillespie Distinguished Scholar with the University of Mississippi. Appreciate you coming on there, Wes. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one. Take care.
You too. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
It's covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
Richard Marx right here waiting for you. I was just sharing with Rhino on the break in his prime there when he recorded that tune back in the 80s. He kind of had the quintessential big hair.
The majestic mane.
He truly did. Oh, man. You told me he's 61 now.
Oh, yeah.
61 years old. Wow.
And according to the little Ticketmaster widget here, it says he's going to be in Birmingham, Alabama on October 7th.
Man.
And Knoxville, Tennessee on the 8th.
I had no idea he was still out there performing. But that's good. Good to hear that. Richard Marx, appreciate that. What does this say? Somebody didn't like the music, huh? Y'all were doing so good with the music, then you blew it. It's Richard Marx, man. What are you talking about? Having a little fun there. So I'm going to get to taxes in a minute because there's big news on that. But before, it's another Linda Blair moment. My head is spinning around. It was just yesterday when it was reported in the Bangor Daily News. That would be Bangor, Maine.
Is there another Bangor?
No, I don't know. There may be.
I've only ever heard of the one in Maine.
Well,
I'm going to have to Google it now.
There may be some folks that aren't aware that there's even a Bangor, Maine. So I didn't want to assume anything there. The headline in this article I'm reviewing, Minnesota, like Maine.
There's one in Alabama.
Oh, there you go. Is protecting the rights of trans athletes. Except Maine has had a bit of a change of heart, and thus the Linda Blair moment. Maine universities agree to keep
dudes in dresses
out of women's sports. That's because the president said you ain't getting any money. Remember, he had a little bit of a squabble with the Maine governor who doubled down on their allowing the transgenders to compete against the girls in sports in the state. And so now the Department of Agriculture announced Wednesday, a couple of days ago, the University of Maine has agreed to comply with the executive order to keep transgender athletes out of women's sports. There are 8 public universities in the University of Maine system. So they said, the USDA said, you're not getting any money if you don't act on this executive order. You're defying a presidential executive order. Why do we even have to have an executive order? I mean, if you really think about it, how silly is it that we have to just put into writing and have it signed by the President of the United States something that like 80% of the country agrees with, that not in a million years would you have thought we'd even be having to talk about this today and consume cycles across government and the educational community. So it's good news in my view. The UMS Chancellor Daniel Malloy provided a statement saying the system is, quote, relieved to have come to an understanding with the USDA. Oh, you mean relieved to know that you still got the money flowing. By the way, they got $29.78 million in funding last year. The USDA claims it has provided over $100 million to the University of Maine system in recent years. The NCAA also amended its gender eligibility policy to prohibit any athlete born biologically male from competing in women's sports. What tipped you off that was crazy there, NCAA? It's just incredible that we're even having to deal with this in this country, in my view. And it took the election of Donald Trump to straighten this mess out. They got a whole bunch of legs and traction under his predecessor with the auto pen, I guess. But Maine's in, they're out. They're in there. So it's done deal, it looks like at this point. Good to see it. So it's Good News Friday in that respect, Rhino. We got Pam Bondi locking up these thugs, these domestic terrorists destroying Teslas. We got the University of Maine saying, yep, we're only going to let the girls compete against the girls. It's a good deal. We got SuperTalk News, Fox News coming your way. And after that, we're going to talk about taxes. Stay with us. Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. Hour 2 of Middays is now live from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Friday, y'all.
All right, so the president, before I get to taxes, just got to pass this on. You know it by now. The president says, be gone with you, Department of Education. It's gone. It's going to be gone.
And collectively, the left's minds exploded.
Unbelievable. And so much fear-mongering and misinformation. The key, the misinformation. It's ridiculous how they pounce all over this kind of stuff. And you made the key point. Because they know they can. And they can go pronounce all these misstatements. And their base just eats it up, takes it to the bank. Oh, it's the gospel truth. Bernie Sanders said it, right? That's exactly what happens.
Not a single original thought in the entirety of the voting bloc that elects Democrats.
Unbelievable. So, I've run into some conflicting information about the amount of money appropriated to the federal Department of Education. It's a little confusing, shall we say. Most of the reports I come up with that I've reviewed indicate about 200. Take a look at it. About $260 billion a year. That's what I get. But I come up with something different on a couple of other pieces that dive into the details of how that money is appropriated. So I'm trying to get the actual amount. What are you seeing there? What do you come up with at the U.S. Department? I see $268 billion, 4% of total federal spending. That's the figure that I see. Most of that, not most of it, but the biggest spending category that I see is student aid.
Yeah, fiscal year 2024 was $268 billion.
Okay, so I had that right. I think the way this is being reported as far as the profile of the agency, this one report I'm looking at, what I think this is the amount that's been made available to it to this point. So you know how that works. The Congress can say, okay, we're going to give you $268 billion. But then the agency, essentially there's a process for them to request that and obtain that money, those funds. And I believe what I'm looking at in this particular report, this is how much they pulled down to date. And that's about $104 billion of the $268. That would be about right when you think of where we are. And this is actually through February. So that's essentially 5 months through the fiscal year. Now, again, look at the breakdown. Student aid, about $65 billion. Office of Elementary and Secondary Education comes in at about 18 or so. I'm not exactly sure what that is. But there's an Office of Special Education, Office of Post-Secondary Education, Disaster Education Recovery, Office of Career, Career Technical, and I can't tell what the rest of it that is. Yeah, and Adult Education, CT&A. I've never heard of that before. Office of Innovation and Improvement, Departmental Management, Institute of Education Sciences, Office of English Language Acquisition. $34 million into that. So I wasn't sure, Rhino, until I looked at it, that I was totally aware of all these various categories of spending, but clearly out front, I'm sure you're looking at it too, it's student aid, right? Clearly, most of the money in terms of category. That's where it goes. And there's lots of clutching of pearls and gnashing of teeth, primarily, best I can tell, just in the social media universe and in the standard media universe, best I can tell, around Title I funding, low-income schools, Pell Grants, and money for children with disabilities. The latter being the one that folks are most concerned about. However, the president said that he considers those to be core responsibilities of the agency, at least today, and that funding will be preserved. Now, the question is, do we need a whole dang separate agency with 4,000 employees for that purpose? I think this is another situation where perhaps it makes sense initially to block grant money to the states and let the states handle this. I don't know why that's so hard to wrap your head around from a leftist perspective. Everything doesn't have to and should not be centrally planned in Washington. That is not the way the country was envisioned. It's not the way the Constitution was drafted. It was not what was conceived of by the founders of this great country. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It is widely held in conservative philosophy. The government functions best when it's more accountable and closest to its constituents. Who feels like, when you think about it, you've got a voice and power to get your voice to Washington, even though you may be represented by somebody right here in the great state of Mississippi, and I think we have good representatives that will hear you, that you can talk to, that you can contact. Fact is, we have 3 Republicans in the U.S. House out of 435 in the body, and we have 2 senators, of course. Still, though, it's just common sense. Makes a lot more sense to me to push this down to the states and let the states operate and manage this function, including these core necessities. So please tell the left, Rhino, stop with the gnashing of teeth and the wailing and the clutching of pearls and all the fear-mongering misinformation.
But then they might actually have to sit there and stew in their own inadequacy and idiocy.
They need a detox is what they need. So, $268 billion. What I hope we see as a result of the abolition of this agency, which, by the way, until Jimmy Carter signed an EO to create it, as I recall, back in my younger days, then we used to have a health, education, and welfare department. And so we had an education function, but it was included in that agency. And what Carter did was break that out, spin that off into a totally separate standalone agency, right? Isn't that what happened?
Yep.
Okay.
Cabinet level.
Okay. So that's right. Got a cabinet secretary and appropriations, much like, Homeland Security was formed after 9/11, correct? We created an agency with a cabinet level position.
Yeah, health and education and welfare, after education was taken out, transformed into HHS.
Okay, Health and Human Services. All right, I thought so. So this $268 billion, I sure would like to see a bunch of that eliminated from a spending perspective. And again, place responsibility on the states. I've said this before, and I know this may not be popular even among Republicans in our state, that maybe it's time to take a hard look at the Medicaid program. It being, again, one where you've got the most involvement of the federal government at the state level. In virtually every state, it's the number 2 spending category from a state budgetary perspective. In the state of Mississippi, sadly, the Medicaid program, when you combine the federal dollars with the state dollars, it is a jointly funded program. It's bigger. It exceeds our general fund spending. It's roughly an $8 billion a year program right here in Mississippi. Maybe we ought to think about exploring ways to begin phasing out the federal Medicaid program and letting the states handle it. And in doing so, reduce federal spending on it, which would, of course, put a cost burden on the states. But I'd much rather the states deal with that than the federal government. And if you say, no, we can't do that, we lose that money. Okay, well, then we're just going to keep having $2 trillion deficits because everybody's got a dang sacred cow that they want to protect. And therefore, we do nothing and kick the can down the road, and we end up with $37 trillion in debt. That's exactly where we are today. We're going to step aside for a break right now. When we return, it's Ben Milam, and he's a multimedia journalist, of course, with SuperTalk Mississippi News. We'll dig into the taxes then. Stay with us.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Standing in the rain with his head hung low, couldn't get a ticket, it was a sold-out show. Heard the roar of the crowd, he could picture the scene, put his ear to the wall, then like a distant scream, he heard one guitar.
Welcome back, everyone. It's the great Lou Graham and Foreigner there, Jukebox Hero, bumping us into this segment where we now welcome Ben Milam, multimedia journalist, SuperTalk Mississippi News.
What's going on, Gerard? Happy Friday, man.
What's up, Ben? Man, thanks for coming on in. You guys have been busy this week.
Oh, yes.
The legislature's been hopping around doing stuff. Mm-hmm. And, of course, top of that list is the news that the Mississippi House of Representatives accepted the Senate's amendment to their original legislation, which essentially gutted the House terminology and the House language, the House provisions to reform taxes in Mississippi, inserted their own. Mm-hmm. And the House concurred at warp speed. And I said, wait a second.
Yeah.
Something ain't right with that. And then subsequently we learned, what's going on?
A little oopsie-daisy.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and yesterday I think everyone was expecting this to go to conference next weekend and for this to be a really drawn-out thing. Of course, this is my first legislative session as a journalist, but that's just what I was told by everyone. You know, any kind of bill or just any sort of piece of policy or legislation that the two chambers go back and forth on and sort of trade amendments and barbs publicly, it's almost always going to go down to the wire, which we were just honestly confused as to why in the world did the House just flew through the House about a week plus early. And so as everyone has talked about and as you've discussed, and I'm sure we'll continue to as we kind of continue to unfold this, it really came down to there were multiple typos, but the big one was on this trigger provision that the Senate put into this House bill that was, I would say, probably the cornerstone of this amended version of basically letting economic growth or lack thereof drive and inform how fast you eliminate the income tax. It would put Mississippi on the path for the cutting of the state income tax. It just depends on how quickly or how slowly based on the economic growth. And that number was supposed to say, and this is how it was discussed on the floor, was that revenue growth overspending must reach 85% for a further drop of the income tax, a 0.25% drop annually after 2030.
Well, I'll say 85% of what a 1 percentage point to the tax rate cut would equal. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes. Instead, we had a decimal point in there that was not supposed to be in there. And so the bill reads 0.85%. So 85 1/100ths of what it was supposed to be, basically rendering the trigger provision useless.
Yeah.
Basically, you have to have basically marginal growth, if you can even qualify it as that, when it comes to state government, to trigger the incremental dropping of the income tax. And so you're going to hurtle towards the cutting of the income tax. Basically what was already proposed in HB 1, pretty close to it. And the House, there was a motion to reconsider, I think, just because of, you feel like you kind of have
deference.
to, right? Yeah, deference and out of maybe a little bit of respect. But then that was tabled today, and they're sending it on to the governor. Governor Tate Reeves came out, a public statement on social media, basically said, I'm going to sign this thing.
Yeah.
And so this is a really, a lot of people, I think, are understandably frustrated by this. But I think it's interesting to me how this was handled, because I don't know that you can really blame the House for passing this on. And I also think it's an unfortunate consequence of, because I think in some ways it feels like the House is taking advantage of a mistake. That's what some people have said, right? But again, I don't think you can blame them. And it's also, I think, a result of how this has been handled on a public stage almost. There have been some barbs traded by the two sides, right? And, I think that has resulted in them saying, well, I'm not sure that we have to handle this with a lot of, candor or patience or caution because of how we got to this point. I think maybe if it were handled differently throughout this process, maybe the two sides would have come together. They would have pushed it to conference and reconsidered the passage of this bill and let them fix this error. But that's not the case. It's on to the governor's desk, and we fully expect it to be signed by Tate Reeves, as he has said that he would publicly. Now, of course, they can go back and fix this, remedy this typo, but you would have to have both chambers agree on that in the future. So this is certainly not over. But in terms of this tax reform bill going to the governor's desk, that part is over.
Yeah. It looks like it's going to be signed into law, and I think I think it's absolutely fair to say, based on what is going to be enacted, that the income tax is going to be phased out without necessitating any sort of economic goals that have to be achieved, which is what the original intent of the Senate bill was. So essentially, here's the way I'd put it. The House got their way in that there's going to be an elimination of the income tax over the period of time without any sort of triggers or requirements. The Senate kind of got their way in that they were always dead set opposed to increasing the general sales tax.
Yes.
Right? So, and the Senate also got their way in that they created a new tier for PERS,
fifth tier for PERS,
which was a separate measure that got incorporated in this bill that I think, had they gone to conference, could have been raised as a potential point of order that could have derailed the whole thing. But I think the House said, wait a second, looks like a little error here. Let's move forward with this deal. So here we go.
Yeah, and you do wonder what the House would have done with this if that error was not in there. But that is a great point, that it's still somewhere in the middle, right? Even with this error.
Yeah, both sides got some of what they want.
Exactly. The House just gets, if it continues this way and if it's not amended down the line at some point, they get full elimination of the income tax a little quicker than they may have if it did go to conference and if they had to make more of a compromise.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, this is eliminating the income tax without any triggers.
Yes, exactly.
Is what it boils down
to.
Let
me ask you this, Gerard, because your middle name is Tax.
Oh, thanks.
Do you think they go back to this next session or the 2 sessions from now and fix this typo, so to speak?
Well, not if the House has their way. I mean, presuming that the same leadership's in place, I don't know that it'll come up next. Well, it'll come up next session. Yes. I don't know that there will be any action on it. Where this is going to matter is when we get into 2030.
Yes.
The session of 2030 is when this is going to matter, because that's when this calculation will be considered.
Right.
And if we're in a situation where, just hypothetically, that we don't have revenues exceeding expenses, but yet we're cutting revenues through the income tax cut by more, that could necessitate the state borrow money. That could put us in quite the conundrum, unless the legislature acted and say, hey, look, guys, we know we signed this deal into law to continue to cut the income tax rate, but we got a problem here from a fiscal, financial perspective that we need to address.
Which is why, both sides have said we can always revisit this.
Well, sure.
Right? Yeah.
Sure. And honestly, Ben, that's consistent with the messaging from House leadership. Speaker of the House, Jason White, Trey Lamar, House Ways and Means. When I ask that question, what happens if we get to a point where we're still chopping the income tax because it's on autopilot, there's nothing to stop it legislatively, statutorily, but yet we honestly can't afford it. They basically said, well, we would expect the legislature to act in a responsible manner at that point and take some sort of action.
Which is, they were just going about it maybe on different ends of it, right? Senate was doing it on the front end.
The Senate was codifying that action.
Yes, and the House was saying, if we need to, we can go back and reassess this.
You got to hang around. We got a break. We got more to talk about, and we'll discuss the tax situation a little bit more. I'm not sure how much in our audience knew about this drafting error, and it is an error. There's no doubt about it, and the Senate knows it, and they well, I won't say what they feel about it, but they're still concerned about this tax elimination being on autopilot and there being nothing to stop it other than legislative action, if necessary. I hope it's not necessary. We're coming right back with Ben Milam.
Is everybody ready?
I'm ready.
Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. Ben Milam, Multimedia Journalist, SuperTalk Mississippi News. Just continuing discussion about this shocking development, honestly, Ben, that because not only did we see significant differences in the approach to addressing taxes. I'm not going to say eliminating, because the Senate initially drafted a bill that would have terminated at 2.99%. Now we have, and then we got an amendment to the bill where it phases it out with achievement of certain triggers, and the House stuck their language in the Senate bill, and the Senate stuck their language in the House bill, and you thought, okay, nothing's going to happen. And then yesterday, when our news director, J.T. Mitchell, sent me a text, I was up in Tupelo, real briefly just said, real short and sweet, said, it looks like the House is concurring with the Senate bill, which was the House bill struck and replaced with Senate language. And I'm thinking, wait a second, something doesn't sound right. Now we find out there's a drafting error.
Yeah. Well, again, the word on the street, so to speak, was that before yesterday was that we just kind of felt like it was going to die, that nothing was going to get done in the regular session, and then it just kind of popped up out of nowhere. But just because we didn't, or at least I have not mentioned it, the base, or kind of the big points of what was passed by the House. It does cut the grocery tax from 7% to 5%. That was one of the big priorities for Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann and the Senate leadership. The income tax, this is, you can go look on supertalk.fm on the article that Caleb Sailors did on this. It shows the graphic that the Senate had and their press conference of basically the big things they wanted to get.
A storyboard.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, income tax 4% to 0% with gradual elimination with triggers, right? And that's the part where the typo messes that up. Probably, basically are no triggers, right? And then you get the 3-cent increase on the excise tax on gas. 3 cents per for 3 years, moving it up to a total of 9 cents on the excise tax. Excuse me. That will go to roads and bridges. That was one of the big things that they wanted to fund directly, recurring revenue stream, and then the fifth tier for PERS. And so you look at that, the storyboard, as you put it, it kind of hit on just about everything aside from the trigger. So it's just maybe a less measured approach than the Senate wanted, but they do get most of what they wanted, and of course the House gets quick elimination of the income tax.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like you landed somewhere close-ish to where you would have landed if they did bang something out in conference weekend.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
That's true. And so let's remind again that there is an increase in excise taxes on fuel.
Yes.
Of 3 cents per gallon that will be phased in over 3 years to a total of 9 cents per gallon.
Yeah, over the next 3 years.
Your gas would, at least the taxes you pay as part of your price per gallon of gas is going to go up from 18.4 cents to 27.4 cents. And I believe that begins to kick in fiscal year 26?
That's correct.
26.
26.
Is that right?
Yes. So, 26 to 29 is that span of increase.
Okay.
But then no sales tax increase. That's the other big, in fact, that's kind of the headline.
Sales tax.
General sales tax increase on that Senate board that they had at their press conference. So, more or less, I think both sides got some semblance of what they want.
Yeah, and something we need to point out and be, again, totally fair and objective about this is the increase in the general sales tax of 1.5% that was included in the original House bill, HB 1, in exchange for that 1.5%, which would stay with the city or county in which the transaction occurred, there would be a clawback and an ending of the current diversion of the 7% full sales tax that we currently pay. 18.5% of that gets diverted to the cities and counties. And what this means is that the revenue from sales taxes to the state will remain relatively constant.
Yeah.
Except there will be a reduction in sales taxes the state receives on groceries. Somewhat, because we're taking that down from 7 to 5, and the state is going to cover the reduction of the diversion to the cities. So it's going to take that into account as well. So there just some of the nuances there, but excise taxes on fuel going up in the state of Mississippi once the governor signs this law.
That's right, 9 cents, as you mentioned, 9 cents per gallon, with a 3-cent increase every year beginning of fiscal year 26. And so, another one of the bullet points on this, the big Senate general plan is to keep cities whole. And this, the excise tax on fuel, would work to annually keep MDOT whole, right?
Yeah,
to fund
give them more money
bridges.
for roads and bridges and to pull down more federal money. That was the purpose of this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the reduction of the grocery sales tax goes into effect here in a few months, July 1, 2025, 7.25% is where we're going.
It was interesting to hear, all the way back at the Neshoba County Fair, that was one of the big questions was to the lieutenant governor and to the governor, what's the priority here? Is it income tax or grocery tax? For Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, it was grocery tax. And so he gets that immediate decrease of 2%, and the governor gets at least to get on track for full elimination of the income tax. And so, it felt like, and we were for a lot of the session at an impasse for those two priorities. But again, as you dig into the nuance of it, you covered some of it there. Both sides have largely gotten what they wanted.
Yeah.
And you would expect at some point, maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, especially in that 2030 session, as you mentioned, after we can really analyze the effect both on a local and state level in terms of tax revenue and effect on the residents as well, you are probably going to have some reassessment of those effects, and if it needs to be tweaked in that 2030 session, it might be tweaked either way.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that I know that it often gets referred to, talking about the trigger calculations as having attained economic growth, sort of. It really requires that our revenues continue to increase, and our spending, and it outpaces our spending to a level that the Senate at least felt comfortable chopping away at the income tax rate.
Yeah.
But something that folks need to keep in mind, a couple of things, points I want to make, is that based on this, there are no triggers. I mean, essentially, there are no. We will achieve this every year after the initial reduction to 3%, which occurs over 4 years. So starting in tax year 31, we'll start reducing the income tax by 0.3% a year.
Yeah.
So what will happen is we'll have no income tax if no changes are made and this bill becomes law in this state in 2040.
Yeah.
That's the way all that will work. So that seems like a long time, but
and that would be from 3% because you go from 4 to
3% to nothing.
Yes.
Because the reason I say that, Ben, is because if you look at the language, even with the drafting error, the maximum amount you can reduce the income tax rate is 0.3%. You follow me?
Yes. Yeah.
Thus, it would take 10 years to eliminate the 3% bracket. That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because we're going to hit the maximum. Yes. Originally, the triggers were 85%, 100%, 115%. We're going to hit the 115% every single year.
Easily.
Right. And that means we will reduce the rate by 0.3%. You see that in the language there?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, it'll be really interesting to see how they handle that moving forward. Again, I think there is a benefit to it of both sides, getting pieces of what they want, because again, I think there is going to be a natural reassessment of the effects of this, and you'll have data to analyze. Of course, we have that after the 2022 tax cuts, right, which really started this kind of big cascade of tax cuts and moving towards income tax elimination specifically. And so you would certainly expect that conversation to continue over the next couple of years and for it to ramp up again in earnest in 2030.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
It should be interesting. And the other thing that folks need to keep in mind is, as we continue to reduce the income tax and then ultimately phase it out, we'll really only have one major source of revenue in the state, and that's sales taxes. So unless you guys go out there as a result of these changes and spend a whole bunch more money, or we attract a whole bunch of people into the state, new people that are spending money, and or cut spending, we're going to run into a budgetary problem potentially.
Yeah, and you won't really see the big effects from those things, the latter things you mentioned, until 20, 30 years down the line.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, I know we spent all our time talking about
that's
that,
all right,
but I think that's kind of the main thing going on.
I think you're right.
Appreciate it, Ben. Thanks for coming in.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Coming right back, folks. Stay with us.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. Thanks so much for joining us today. And that was a good discussion with Ben. Appreciate all the great work that SuperTalk Mississippi News has done tracking this issue and getting it out to you as soon as they hear this stuff. And they're tracking it. They're in touch with all the people involved in the sausage making down there under the dome. So it will be interesting to see what sort of announcements we get. It's a pretty big deal when you think about it. If this gets national attention as well, I'll be curious to see that, Rhino, because joining the ranks of the other, 9 states, I think, that do not have an income tax, including to our north, Tennessee. And a lot of folks ask, in fact, on the C Spire text line, how do they do it? Now, I don't know about the free college that's talked about here. I'm looking at the text that came in while we were talking to me.
You're allowed to go to, I want to say it's 8 or 10 different universities that, as long as you graduate from a Tennessee high school, you can go to those colleges or universities for the first 2 years for free.
Okay.
Free in quotes there. I mean, somebody's paying for it. You just don't have to pay for it.
I'm not sure if that's the result of state-level funding or...
I mean, they've got like twice the population we do.
Yeah, for the same number of schools.
Major metropolitan hubs. You've got Memphis, which has its problems, but it's still a major metropolitan area with FedEx and the airport and all that. And you got Nashville and Knoxville.
Yep. Agree. All
population
thriving
centers equal tax base.
That plus higher levels of income, of course. But just looking at how Tennessee derives its revenue for its general fund, mainly its general fund, sales taxes account for more than 60% of its general fund spending. And in Mississippi, sales taxes account for 38%. So there's a difference there. In Mississippi, individual income taxes account for about 28%. So 66% of total revenues into the general fund in Mississippi come from first sales taxes and then individual income taxes. In Tennessee, again, roughly 60%, 58% of their revenue comes from sales taxes. They also have franchise and excise taxes, which are higher than the state of Mississippi. I don't like either of those taxes. In the Mississippi, we have a corporate income and franchise tax. In Tennessee, they have franchise and excise taxes, and that's how they produce essentially that bucket of revenue. But that accounts for 18% of all spending in Tennessee. And then they've got, just like we do, they've got insurance taxes. They have insurance and banking. We have just an insurance premium tax. That comes in at about 5%, similar in Tennessee. They got another category, just looking at the Tennessee documents, Rhino, called all other taxes, 7%. We have one, too. It's 3.6%. So I don't know what that means. Now, what you'd really have to do is dig into how they in Tennessee allocate their general fund revenues. And here's what I mean by that. Think about this. In Tennessee, the average sales tax is 9.75%. We're accustomed to 7% here. Most localities around the state, with the exception, right, of 2, I think you and I determined, that received the proper authority from the legislature to layer on an additional local tax.
No, that's more than 2.
Well, I'm talking about just the sales tax. I'm not talking about the lodging and the restaurants. I'm talking about just the general sales tax. It's Jackson and Tupelo, I think, right? And you've got to also designate when you apply for these waivers from the legislature, what are you going to do with this extra money? Is Tupelo's not water or infrastructure or something to that effect, I think? But in general, now, in Tennessee, it's actually different. They do have the additional restaurant lodging taxes in some locations. But in addition to that, virtually every county and city in the state of Tennessee has additional taxes. What does this mean from an income tax perspective? Well, if they're producing more revenue locally, then the state is not required to funnel as much money from its funds to, see what I mean by that? Down to the local level. They keep it at the state level, but you're paying for it, just not in income taxes to the state. You're paying for it at the cash register. I think when I looked it up the other day, Rhino, in Shelby County, Tennessee, home of Memphis, where Memphis is located, you buy groceries, it's 10% in Shelby County, Tennessee, in Memphis. Coming right back after Fox News and SuperTalk News.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. I've been home in a year or more. I hope she holds on a little longer. Send a letter on a long summer day.
We are back with you in the Element Well studio. It's the afternoon portion of Middays on this
Friday, y'all.
Please tell me the cold weather is no more for a while. I'm tired of it. Ready for it to warm up?
I mean, it's not going to warm up a whole heck of a lot today, and it's going to be a little bit chilly tonight. But yeah, next week looks like the highs for the majority of the Magnolia State are firmly in the 70s.
I can dig it. I'm ready for it. Be gone with you, you cold weather. You know what's really weird is when we're on daylight saving time and it's obviously later in the day, but it's cold. That doesn't seem to go together. Today on In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar, you'll hear part 2 of an interview with Mark Pattison, who played in the NFL and after his playing years were over became a mountain climber, who has now climbed the 7 highest mountains in the world, including Mount Everest. In the Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar is presented by Superior Catfish. Remember, there's catfish, then there is Superior Catfish. It's U.S. farm-raised catfish with homegrown flavor. Ask for it by name at your favorite store or restaurant. Go to superiorcatfish.com for more info. Also, Rhino, shout out to my son, Nicholas Charles Gibert. It's his birthday.
Happy birthday.
Today is Big Nick's birthday. Yeah, man, we're going to figure something out for a little celebration. All right, on the C Spire text line. Golf. That could be cool. Nick can hit a golf ball pretty far, just want you to know. He's developed into a pretty good player, having spent most of his athletic career playing baseball. And most baseball players can make that transition. They're usually pretty good with a hand-eye contact sort of stuff.
Well, in fairness, it is a closer mechanic than just about any other sport.
I would agree. Just different plane. All right, on the C Spire text line, we got several to get to. Going to try to help you out with that right now, folks, and review some of those and respond. Let's hope Mississippi gets the same benefits as Texas and Florida and Tennessee does for not having a state income tax. So Rhino and I were talking about this off the air, and the question came up, how do these other states do it? So look at Tennessee real quick. based on the information we shared with you earlier, and hopefully you caught that, their average sales tax rate is 9.75%. Many times we've shared, including even in a little chart I've got in the article I wrote about a month or so ago analyzing the House bill, HB 1, which did contemplate originally, of course, increasing the general sales tax from 7 to 8.5%. That would still put us below all the neighboring states. Tennessee, 9.75%. It's okay, you don't have an income tax, but you're paying 9.75% general sales tax on average because different counties and cities have different layers of sales tax tacked on to the state's 7%. Now, in Mississippi, that's not very common, other than the local lodging and restaurant tax that you see in effect in many municipalities in the state. But the general sales tax, everything outside of those particular commodities, the general sales tax, you're going to pay 7% across the vast majority of the state, with the exception being Tupelo and Jackson, who have exceptions. And then keep this in mind. We have low sales taxes on vehicles. Farm implements. You and I looked at that list. It's fairly lengthy of the various carve-outs and exceptions that have been granted legislatively through the years on the purchase of different commodities. Another example, sales tax on energy. In Mississippi, farming operations do not pay sales tax on their energy bills. However, other businesses do. Now, as a resident, you don't. So it's things like that that differ. But because Tennessee, and this is what was designed and really the inspiration for the original House bill, in Tennessee, with a 9.75% average sales tax, only 7% is state. The state retains all 7%. In the state of Mississippi, that 7% sales tax that you pay when you go to the store, 18.5% of it goes back to the municipality in which the purchase was made. And there's another 9% or so, I think it goes to the Education Enhancement Fund, if I'm not mistaken, Rhino. So bottom line is the state keeps about 70%, whereas in Tennessee the state keeps 100%. And the counties and the cities receive their funding from that additional layer, that 2.75% on average additional layer. That's exactly what was figured in and designed into the original House bill, HB 1. We were going to go up on the general sales taxes to 8.5%, but the state was going to keep 100% of the 7% to offset elimination of the income tax. So now, elimination of the income tax is going to rely on you guys spending more money, because that will be the primary source of revenue. Now, of course, we should be looking at cutting spending. That's easier said than done, and that will be an absolute requirement. It will be essential for this math to work. Where do you cut? Education? Well, we've talked about some school district consolidation. We're going to study that now. No action. That got lots of repudiation. So we're going to study that to see if that's practical and where that could make sense. But you've also got the constant market dynamics and pressures of teacher pay and the need to keep up with the other states, because they'll sure enough leave and seek employment in the other states, even though we spend money to educate them to become teachers. And they say, wait, I can work in Mississippi for X, or I can work in Tennessee or Arkansas, Louisiana or Alabama for X plus another 20%. I'm going there. That's the risk. And so the state then has to respond by increasing teacher pay. That's why we need to be looking at cutting some of the back office administrative costs to offset that real possibility. Then there's Medicaid, the number 2 spending category. Man, who knows where that's going with the Doge team acting very aggressively in cutting spending, especially in these entitlement programs now, which includes, actually Medicaid's not an entitlement program, it's welfare. Social Security and Medicare are entitlement programs. That means you're entitled to them. I know that term often gets misused and it's widely misunderstood, but that is what Social Security and Medicare are. You're entitled to them, thus they're defined as entitlements. Medicaid's pure welfare. You don't pay in to join the Medicaid program. You pay in to be a participant and to receive benefits out of Social Security and Medicare. That's a two-way street. Medicaid's a one-way street. That's funded by general sales taxes. Actually, it's funded by borrowing money, and that's the whole dang point. So I think you can expect to see loss of revenues to the state from the federal government in the Medicaid program, and the state government's going to have to make some really tough choices, and it could be faced with situations where the federal government says, well, you're either going to have to cover this or we're not going to cover our part. We're not going to fulfill our financial responsibility. We don't have to because you're not matching yours in accordance with the law. These are real concerns that are going to pop up. And then corrections, which already, that's the number 3 spending category in Mississippi. It's already under a lot of pressure, which is likely to cost some money to get the DOJ off of us. So the House taking advantage of a typo will destroy all future trust between the two chambers at the Capitol. Additionally, the bill was misrepresented before the Senate on accident, and Trey Lamar, knowing the error, did not tell the House members on the floor about the error. That's on the C Spire text line. Let's see here. What else we got coming in? Please explain the state tax time period. What does that mean, Rhino? I'm not sure.
State taxes are due? That's the same as federal.
Are you talking about the difference between the fiscal year and the calendar year, perhaps?
Maybe.
Because taxation to you as an individual is calendar year based. The state does its budgeting on a fiscal year. Yeah. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Since interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go.
This is huge news. Huge news. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you. Bermuda, Bahama, come on, pretty mama. Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go? Jamaica, off the Florida Keys. There's a place called Kokomo. That's where you wanna go to get away from it all. Bodies in the sand, tropical drink melting in your hand. We'll be falling in love to the rhythm of a steel drum band down in Kokomo, Jamaica.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. Thanks so much for joining us again. We're in the Element Wealth studio. Watching the Dow today. It's down 57 points. It has shed most of its losses at one point today. It was down about 250. And the NASDAQ also down today. Investors are concerned about stagflation. Something, man, I haven't heard since the old Carter days. What that means, folks, is that inflation remains rather stubborn, sticky, but without there being economic growth. Typically, when you're experiencing a robust economy and lots of economic growth, that means there's high demand, lots of spending, and that, of course, can drive inflation. A particularly vexing problem for policymakers, especially monetary policy, which comes from the Fed, and that mainly comes in the form of benchmark interest rate setting, is when you've got inflation, but an economy that's kind of treading water. That's what's described as stagflation. Powell, in his remarks, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, indicated concerns about that. Oil up today to $68. That is also, I don't know that I would call that a concern, but it seems to be kind of stuck in that for the last few months in that $65 to $70 a barrel range. There have been some announcements of some new projects of oil and gas exploration, and the biggest thing is just the president coming in and reversing all these goofy orders Biden signed, which prohibited the export of liquid natural gas, which is a moneymaker for America big time. And also, in doing so, it boosts supply, which drives the cost down. It's just plain old economics, something that is lost on the former president and the entire Democrat Party, it would appear. Funny money, how's it doing today, Rhino? Last I checked, it was down a bit.
It's down a little bit. It's still north of 80, though. I'm convinced that's its new floor.
Yeah, I hear you. The governor of Maine got caught by President Trump in that meeting and just bowed up and said they would follow the law, just wouldn't commit in person that he was right. Guess she read the law. Yeah, I think, Mike, I may have misread it here, but you're right. The governor was a bit defiant originally when the president asked, what are you going to do? And I don't remember her response, but I do remember him saying, well, you're going to lose federal funding. I mean, he didn't really mince words there. Also says, I can see this error with respect to the tax bill being an issue in the next election. It certainly could be, and I don't know which direction it would work in. Kind of hard to tell. But you're right. It certainly could be an issue in the next direction, the next election. That's perfectly fair to assert at this point. Ben from Madison, interesting term of events. Good recap, thanks. He said he was pleasantly surprised to see the legislature pass a tax reform bill. Yeah, so again, he asked about the typo in the errors, and hopefully, folks, our analysis of that was understandable. Just stated real simply, the sections of the bill that define the required triggers in order to further reduce in any given year the income tax rate included some misplacement of a decimal point. You either needed to lose the decimal point to go along with the percentage sign, the decimal point before the figures or within the figures, depending on which trigger you're referring to, or the percentage sign after. But the combination of the two makes 85% specified, drafted in the bill as 0.85%. In other words, less than 1%. So all we have to do is have revenues exceeding expenses by 0.85% of what a 1% drop. So here's the way you can calculate that. That 1%, which is the tax rate, assuming that you drop the tax rate or you calculated what 1 percentage rate of the tax rate is worth in terms of revenue, it's about $420 million. So what it means here, Rhino, is that using a 0.85% as the threshold, as the trigger, you need what? A $40 million delta between revenues and expenses, roughly, using that figure? 0.85%. I do that right? No, I didn't.
That's too much, isn't it?
Yeah, it's what I say, 40? It's 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Now I'm messing up the dang decimal point. But I'm doing this on the fly out of my head, so... And it didn't
on a Friday,
but it didn't take me but a couple of seconds to realize, no, I wouldn't have put that down.
After the afternoon has started.
That's exactly true. And I'm not drinking or anything except the water that is in the bottle that is labeled with the iconic SuperTalk logo.
SuperTalk brand water. Not available for sale.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Loving the bumper music. Someone was in high school in the 80s like I was. Love the show today. Thank y'all, David from Brandon. Appreciate that. That'd be
Close.
me, David.
I was born in the 80s.
That's right.
My older brother was a child of the 80s. Well, he was born in the 70s, but he had his formative years in the 80s, and he introduced me to 80s music.
There you go.
I didn't come around till halfway through.
Sounds like Shady Dilbert kind of got hornswaggled himself. Kind of hornswaggled himself. Says Mackey, in Vaden. The typo seems anything but. Look, even the best among us can, this Rhino, can look at stuff, and if you look at these bills enough, like you and I do, it all does start to run together, does it not? I mean, you have to really be careful and focus and concentrate. And so this is understandable human error.
As for the concept that this is going to somehow break trust between the two chambers, it's a whole bunch of lawyers in both chambers. They live for this crap. They live for finding a misplaced decimal point.
You're right about that, but would it be okay if I just told you passed on that in business we don't do that? Lawyers do.
Business lawyers do.
Lawyers representing businesses do. 100%. Absolutely. We business people, I actually had a lawsuit that involved a competitor that sued me. Actually, they sued my employee. They sued me originally, my company, and then they dropped, not me personally, my company. And I never forget when we finally, after all the evidence gathering and the depositions, how that interrogatories,
discovery phase.
Discovery, that's right. I couldn't remember the term. And finally, we get in front of the judge, and not officially. He called us, and here's what he was in court, and he said, "Wait in my chambers with his person." He comes out, he sits down, and it's the other business owner and their lawyer, his lawyer, and me and my lawyer. First thing he said, to your point, is, look, can't you two business people just work this out? Now, he was right, honestly. Why do you want to bring this into court? He was absolutely, that's the point. He was trying to essentially at that point sort of arbitrate, some sort of settlement. Unfortunately, the plaintiff, the other side, wouldn't let go. It cost them a bunch of money, and they got a teeny tiny bit of that at the end of the day. Because they pursued it. Went all the way to jury trial. It had to do with a non-compete agreement. I'm told that case, been told by other lawyers, has set precedent, case law, in Mississippi for non-compete. My little company case. What more better claim to fame could you have than that, right? But let me pass this on real quick before we go to break. I learned a very important, valuable lesson that cost me money many years ago in dealing with legal documents and contracts that have lots of math and computations in them, which is what this bill does, right? And that is, besides just including the legal language, which is a bad way to do math, include some examples with hypothetical figures so that there's just no confusion, to avoid confusion. And there's some legal preface like to avoid any confusion. I don't know exactly what it is. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio. Stay with us.
Today, Gerard Gibert. Going beyond the headlines, breaking down the stories that matter to Mississippi. Middays with Gerard on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, my friend.
friends to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. There behind the glass stands a real blade of grass. Be careful as you pass. Move along, move along. Come inside, the show's about to start. Guaranteed to blow your head apart. Rest assured, you'll get your money's worth. Ladies show, it happened all right. You gotta see the show. It's a lot of move. You gotta see the show. It's rock and roll. Oh, right before your eyes, people laughed up from the skies, and he laughs until he cries.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. I mean, it's just a really interesting development. It's fascinating to see how all this played out. This is not anything you could have ever predicted, for sure. But talking about the tax bill and the drafting issue within it, just interesting to watch all that play out. I don't know what else to say about it, honestly. Other than that, just not anything you saw coming. But looks like it's going to become law. Something else I was just talking to Rhino about, when you just look at the language in the bill where it talks about comparing the excess of revenue over expenses as projected to what a cut in the income tax rate would be relative to revenue as a revenue value. Well, that cut in the income tax in the bill is referred to, and it's referred to a particular year when it does that. I think fiscal year 2029. And it looks at the revenue from fiscal year 2029. And in 2029, of course, the sales tax rate the income tax rate at that point will be 3%, because the bill does reduce the income tax rate beginning in 26 by 0.25 percentage points per year. So again, a full percentage point of tax rate of 1 over 4 years. 0.25 a year times 4 years, 1. So we would go from 4 to 3 over 4 years. Tax years 27, 28, 29, 30. And then the Senate, or not the Senate, but the legislature, the financial people in government would do the math. And they would say, okay, you guys are going to appropriate X dollars next year. Our revenue, our trailing revenue for the prior fiscal year equaled this at the 3%, this would be 2029, 3% income tax rate. If we were to reduce that to 2%, this is how much that would equate to. In other words, what's 1/3 of that total revenue? If the revenue in that year's 29 is $3 billion, 1/3 of that's $1 billion. So if the excess over revenue over expenses is at least $850 million, if you're following me there, that's what it would what would be required under the original language as contemplated by the Senate. But instead of it being the $850 million, using that scenario now, it's considerably less than that, because we're not using 85%, we're using 0.85%. So we'd have to lose right, Rhino, I think we'd have to lose four of the zeros in that, because we'd be talking about a 0.85 times the $1 billion in that scenario. Let's see, what does that calculate out to do? I think I did that right. Do it real quick on my little calculator. Yeah. So that's no hill to climb for sure, and we'd hit that figure. There wouldn't be any problem with that. So that means automatically we're going to be chopping away at the old income tax rate. The only source of revenue, not the only, but certainly from a consumption perspective, individual perspective, would be the consumption tax, the sales tax. We'd be relegated to that. Mailman Clayton says, yeah, tourism, that's what they got going on in those states. There's no doubt about that, talking about Tennessee, Florida. Did we look that up? Florida, like 140 million people visited Florida last year. Insane.
If not more.
Yeah, and they all come in, they spend money. So that's generating lots of sales tax. You looked up some demographics for us comparing Tennessee to Mississippi. Interesting data that you found. Share a little bit of that.
Yeah, like looking at the businesses in Tennessee versus Mississippi, the total annual payroll, and this is from the census, so it's not entirely up to date. These are as of 2022. But the total annual payroll for businesses in Tennessee was $161 billion plus. Compare that to Mississippi. Our total annual payroll as of 2022 in the Magnolia State was $43 billion.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
A quarter. And then you look at other aspects such as housing. This is what really startled me. Building permits as of 2023 in Tennessee. 47,463 permits. In the Magnolia State for the same year, 7,700.
Incredible.
Tennessee's building almost 7 times the number of housing units as we are in the Magnolia State.
Because there's an influx of population, as you well know, particularly into the Nashville area.
It also helps with the employment numbers because in Tennessee there are 2.8 million people employed compared to the Magnolia State where it's less than 1 million.
And they make more money and they're buying more stuff and generating those sales taxes. Speaking of which, Joe in Quitman says, when I was in Tennessee last week, sales taxes range from 9.75 to 12.5%, depending on activity, state, city, entertainment. Yeah, and that, thank you, Joe, that pretty much validates what we've been talking about, which is virtually every county, if not every single county and municipality in Tennessee layers on additional taxes because that's how they get their money. Again, they don't get money from the state like we do here. We take that simple 7% sales tax that we all pay and we say, okay, state, you keep this much of it, and you cities, you get this much of it, and then the Education Enhancement Fund, we're only keeping 70% of the 7%. Whereas in Tennessee, they're keeping 100%. So for the cities and counties to operate, they have their own sales tax base, essentially. That's what the original House bill was designed to do with the additional 1.5%. That's gone away. We don't have that now. We're going to continue to divert to the cities, and in fact, with respect to reduction of the sales tax on groceries, the state will take in less revenue at the state level from that reduction, and the state also is going to make the cities whole. Right now, by the way, that's about $73 million a year just from sales tax on groceries that cities receive in the form of a diversion. That will go down somewhat, and the state's going to cover it. It will go down by 2/7, whatever that amounts to. Let's see, that'd be about, 35% or so, I think. So we'll cover that. That's about $25 million. That's the way that works out. So the state's going to make the cities whole in that respect. Yep, and the tourism mecca of Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, says Keith and JS. Why do you think Governor Reeves is so adamant about the House bill when the Senate bill is more wise? Well, he didn't want to have any triggers. I mean, he just wanted to have a straight elimination of the income tax. He's made that very clear for quite some time. It's been a priority. And the Senate bill essentially had requirements, had certain objectives, economic objectives that we just described that would have to be attained, and it's measured annually once the initial sales tax is reduced from 4 to 3 over 4 years. After that, all based on these triggers. And the House bill didn't have that. Jim from Caledonia, raising the sales tax in Mississippi will hurt big-ticket items like boats, RVs, etc. Okay, so just as folks, Jim, not trying to be argumentative with you here, man, but, Rhino, just as folks have said, hey, how did Tennessee and Florida do it? I'd ask the same question. How did Tennessee and Florida do it? And other states that don't have an income tax without all these special carve-outs and waivers and exceptions we have to sales taxes. I'm not suggesting we need to do it. I'm just trying to answer the question of how do other states get away with and fund their government appropriately without having an income tax. And underneath the surface of that, the answer is by all these other taxes that they levy that we don't here.
But consumption tax is ideologically more conservative than an income tax.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It has been for a long time because it's more voluntary. Income tax is not. Your state income tax, as Patrick from Tennessee, is very unpopular. When you look on your pay stub and see that state income tax, it just makes you mad.
If you're Gerard Gibert, he keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
The great Bill Withers.
We can't get out of here today without at least mentioning the partnership that has garnered so much attention in the last 24 hours.
What's that?
The partnership between DoorDash and Klarna.
Yeah. Buy now, pay later for your dinner.
You can now make 4 easy payments on that breakfast burrito.
No, wait, Rhino. It's easy. Convenient. Right. Isn't that
I got to finance my Frosty. Hang on.
That just shocked me when I saw that this morning. Buy now, pay
I meant to bring it up earlier when we were talking about
dinner.
the economy, because is that a sign of a good economy or a struggling economy?
Wow. You know, it's a true story, though. You know that the prognosticators are going to start paying attention to that.
Oh, yeah?
How many people are BNPLing their tacos? I mean, seriously, there's fried rice, right? Patrick says, talking about the income tax, I hear you, Patrick. Again, I'm all for eliminating the income tax. You guys know, I campaigned for this at 22 and thought the first bill the House had, which would have done it in a short period of time by simply raising the sales tax, as Rhino points out, a way more efficient and attractive approach to generating income for government, revenue for government, made sense to me. But, Patrick, keep this in mind. Lots of folks in Mississippi, all retired people, they don't pay income taxes. State income taxes. It's exempt. Okay? And then the changes we made in 22 really took a lot of people, Rhino, off the tax rolls in Mississippi. Because the first $10,000 after personal exemption and standard deduction, adding that all together, is exempt. And then we reduced the rate down to 4% of everything over that. So I think you'd be surprised to find out, Patrick, just how many people in Mississippi, even with an income tax, don't pay income taxes. Hell, at the federal government, it's way worse. We've discussed that many times. So I'm with you, and I'm all for this, just so you'll know. I don't want to be sending any different message in that. But it is fair to say, from a mathematical perspective, there are a lot of folks, and unfortunately, in Mississippi, whose income doesn't achieve the level where they are subject to income tax. I missed when tax cuts began. Okay, yeah, let's go through that. So remember, based on the bill that passed in 22, we went from eliminating the 4% in 23 4% bracket. It's gone. It's been gone. In 24, then we ended up with a single bracket of all income over $10,000 at 5. We reduced it in 24, tax year 24. It's the one you're doing your taxes for right now, to 4.7. This year it's 4.4. Next year it's 4. That's 26, calendar year 26. The following year it will go to 3.75. That would be calendar year 27. 3.5 for 28. 3.25 for 29. Down to 3 in 2030, calendar tax years. Then it phases out after that based on these triggers, which will never come into play. The maximum amount it can be reduced in the years subsequent to tax year 2030, talking about the rate of income taxes, is 0.3%. And that is going to occur, I believe, in every single year, beginning in 2031, all the way up to 0 when we get to 2040. That's the way right now this bill is drafted, because the trigger is meaningless, because as Rhino and I have already shared with you, it's about, what'd you say, it's a few $1,000 or a couple of $1 million or something?
Yeah, I mean, the way it's being interpreted, you have to get just shy of $4 million.
Yeah.
But you could be ticky-tack and make that number lower depending on how you read the language. But that's the problem with legalese.
Yeah. Now, somebody did say something about Tennessee and having low car tags. Yeah, here we go. Car tags in Tennessee are 67 across the board. We need to figure, doesn't matter if it's a Pinto or a Ferrari, we need to figure that one out. I can tell you how to figure that out. You increase the sales tax. That's the whole point I was trying to make. They got to get their money from somewhere. Keep this in mind, folks. In Mississippi, counties don't participate in sales taxes. They don't get a diversion, nor do school districts. So what happens in Tennessee is they say, okay, we'll give you a cheap car tag, but you're going to have to pay more at the cash register. In some cases, who was it that just reported to us, was in Tennessee last week, some cases 12%, almost double what we pay here. Yeah, if we did that, we could reduce the car tags as well. It's a pick your poison deal at the end of the day. Some states, such as Tennessee and Florida, are blessed with lots of tourism that spend money. We don't have as much of that here. I didn't get to PERS and the changes made there. We did cover that yesterday. We'll cover that Monday. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.